Hello and welcome back to another update. This one will be the latest updates from the front line. Starting out in the Zaporizhzhia region in the Ukrainian offensive, we see that they have managed to capture the town of Rivnopil here to the west of the Velika Novosilka area. So they have now managed to capture the hills here to the northwest of Makarivka. This is a very interesting development because first of all, they've managed to capture the hills, which removes the high ground advantage of the Russian forces. This also means that they have managed to advance on the whole part of the front line, not just parts of it isolated, but now it's all connected. And then finally, the situation has now developed in the sense that from a defensive position like this on the Russian side, it is now reversed. So the logistics does not connect between Staromaiske and Priudne, but it is separated through Staromonivka here to the northeast, and then through Lyubimivka and northwards in the western parts. So the eastern and western parts are not connected. So this indicates many things that could happen. First off, we have determined that the Ukrainian forces with this advance are now able to push further because they have removed the Russian height advantage. So we'll be seeing a lot more battles in the direction of Staromaiske, Uroshaine, and further eastwards in the direction of Novodonetsk and Kremenchuk. So these areas, there will generally be more fighting as the Ukrainian forces will continue advancing in this direction. And then if we look at the western parts, the village of Priudne has no connection to the village of Rivnopil, which means that it was already a separate front compared to the eastern parts. So with this, them being able to be attacked from the Ukrainians from the northern parts due to the ground being solid, as there is currently the summer season, there's not a lot of rain. So the Ukrainian forces can attack from the northern side as well as from the eastern side and from the western side. So Priudne would be in a vulnerable position. So we may see the Russian forces retreat from that to Remivka. This is because, first of all, we will see them have a straight line defense from Stepova to Volodina. And then we also have to look at the logistics. And from this, we can see that from Remivka, the only road to Novoukrainske, Stepove, and Priudne is through this road that also connects to Priudne, which means that they have to drive the supplies here before splitting it into two directions. There's no multiple roads. They have to use one road for both sides. So we may see the Russian forces either withdraw from Priudne or from Stepove and Novoukrainske to prevent a issue with the logistics and supplies on the front line. If they do not retreat, then they would be in a position where they are not well supplied at all in comparison. So we may see the Russian forces set up a new defensive position here to the western side through Novoslatopil here from the south, and then towards Remivka and Priudne, just like this as the new defensive position, as these are all isolated both logistically and also geographically from the other villages. And combining this with the villages of Priudne, Remivka, Volodne, and Staromonivka, then they will have a proper defensive line here as well. So generally, we will see the Russian forces focusing their defenses on this part ahead of the first line of defense. And then we have to also take a look at the villages here to the northeast of Volodine and Staromonivka. These are all well connected. They have each their own road of supply, and then there's a river in between, which means that the Russian forces would be supplying on the western bank and on the eastern bank of the river line. So they're able to actually push them back and hold their positions. Meanwhile, the Ukrainians are now in a position where the next defensive positions of the Russian forces are in a U shape, which means that if the Ukrainians advance into it, then they'll be able to be attacked from three different directions from the Russian forces, both from the eastern parts, from Staromaiske and the villages by the river line, from the western parts, from the villages here, and from the southern parts from the village here. So they would be at a disadvantage in that sense, which would indicate that the Ukrainian forces will focus on either of these sides, attacking them one by one rather than going in and through the center, as this is all open fields, which would leave them vulnerable to artillery. So most likely we'll see the Ukrainian forces attacking from the western parts and from the eastern parts straight at the lines rather than going through the center. So although the Ukrainians captured Rivnopil, they will most likely not advance through the center, but focus their forces on each of the sides to attack from those directions instead. Other than this, we have some developments here by the Antonovsky Bridge. So the Ukrainian forces have launched some sort of amphibious scouting attack, where they have sent approximately 50 soldiers, according to Russian sources, to attack on the coastline, try to establish some positions around the Antonovsky Bridge. So this is according to Russian sources, because the Ukrainians will not report on their own offensive as it is happening in real time. Similar to the Zaporizhzhia offensive, they're not reporting on that very clearly. So the Ukrainian forces have crossed the river, the Antonovsky Bridge, and are now in the central islands and are fighting through it, while the Russian forces are mainly launching artillery strikes and are fighting against it. So the approximate number is 50 soldiers, which indicates that it is some sort of scouting group or probing group rather than an actual offensive force. And now back to the Zaporizhzhia front. We have a lot of videos of some combat. First off, we have this video here of a Ukrainian BMP being engaging a Russian T-80 tank, presumably. It's difficult to check from the small size of this video, but essentially we are seeing this tank fights head on with the BMP, and the BMP is unable to fight a tank which has heavier armor and heavier cannon, so of course it ends up losing to the Russian tank. Then we have this video here of some Ukrainian soldiers in the Zaporizhzhia front. Not exactly sure where, but it is on the Zaporizhzhia front. They disembark from this truck. And something very interesting is that we hear the gunfire, but it takes a while for them to actually take cover. Some go behind the car, unsure where to go. Clearly not a good position to go. There are two soldiers and the one filming who realized that the best way is to take cover next to the side of the road. So this is actually a video similar to that of the videos we saw at the very start of the Russian invasion. This indicates that these units are well trained. However, they are unexperienced. So what is the main difference between these is that the well-trained soldier knows how to fire a gun, knows how to drive a tank. They do not have the reflexes and the instincts that is necessary to survive in war. They take longer time finding cover, they react slower, and all of these things. So essentially we have some who have an innate talent in warfare, like the two guys who instantly take cover on the side of the road. And then we have others who are very slow on the uptake, and essentially these guys are the ones who are the first to go. So the current situation is very interesting because we have seen that the Ukrainians still have some power in their offensive. They have yet to use their main thrust, their main force, and they are slowly but surely advancing, getting the upper hand in some positions, like here in the Rivnopil, taking the high ground here to the west of the river line, allows them to have the high ground against the villages like Staromaiske, Urushaine, and other villages here to the east, and also gives them ability to advance in the central parts. However, they are still yet to reach the first line of defense, the first line of fortified defense, which indicates that the Russian forces also have their main forces behind. They still have their main forces in reserve. So the Ukrainian forces and the Russian forces still have not committed their main forces yet. So the outcome of this offensive is still unclear, but what we can say is that the Ukrainians are slowly advancing, and that is the current situation. And that is going to be all for this update. Thank you all for watching, and have a great day.